Welcome to the bold analysis, ladies and gentlemen. I have taken time to listen to the context of Ndindi Nyoro's statement on the situation, the state of our debt, on the state of the economy. And I can categorically say that the CS for Treasury, John Mbadi, is totally out of order to attack Ndindi Nyoro because of the debt question. And in fact, in a well-coordinated manner, I've realized that Raila Odinga's ODM axis are the ones that have been charged to attack Ndindi Nyoro. Sometimes when something is raised, you lack emotional intelligence, or rather let me say you lack the rational appeal. When something is raised against your docket and then you resort to some emotional charade, there is absolutely no basis, zero basis, for Mbadi to attack Ndindi Nyoro simply because Ndindi Nyoro is telling the country and is telling the administration that we need to be a little bit cautious about the state of the debt. Ladies and gentlemen, I would want you to get this. Mbadi is totally out of order to attack Ndindi Nyoro.
So we must support our security. Let me conclude, Mr. Speaker, because I know there will be further questions, and ask that we have and plead that as leaders, people out there may not like us. They may say all sorts of things, but we are still their leaders. And therefore, I am just appealing that we are all privileged. We need to be sometimes a little bit cautious. I listened to one of us argue that this country is likely to be taken to pari, that we are likely to default in debt payment. That is irresponsible statement. It is irresponsible, it can cause panic, and it should not come from someone who has chaired Budget and Appropriations Committee. Let me tell you, yes, there were times when we had challenges, but where we are, we don't have a problem with debt sustainability. The numbers are there. The figures are there. Even the IMF has the figures. World Bank has figures. We have been rated out there. The problem we have is about liquidity. Loans were taken at a particular point of time. Most of them are maturing between now and 2032. That is why we have the pressure. After 2032, you go and look at our books and they're public. From 2034 to 2048, we don't have any loan to pay. There is no external loan to pay around that time. Whether bilateral, whether commercial, multilateral, we don't have much loans. But between now and 2032, we must work together. This House has a responsibility. Treasury has a responsibility. Executive has a responsibility. We must work together to steady our economy. And that is why some of us were taken to the executive as experts to make sure that we steer the ship. So don't discourage. This process will continue. I am committed to it. There is no time we will default in our loan repayment. This country is strong economically. It is the strongest economy in the region. So let nobody scare people that Kenya is going to default. We may be struggling. But let me ask you, have we failed to pay salaries? No.
What he's saying, that it is causing panic for people to talk about debts. The debts are sovereign debts, remember. The debts of the country is a shared responsibility of the Kenyan people. And so the fear-mongering that Mbadi wants to instill by saying, you should not talk about it because we are causing panic. Which panic? Which panic? So if we are at the brink of defaulting, so if you cause that panic, so what happens? Come on, come on, come on, come on. Mbadi is totally out of order. And I would want you to listen to what Nani said, but what Nyoro said. But before that, just to realize that there is a coordinated raid against Ndindi Nyoro. Elisha Odhiambo, the gay member of parliament, today in parliament in the morning, they were actually debating the new IBC, the new principal secretaries and CSS that have been given the jobs. And actually, Ndindi Nyoro spoke about the size of government, saying that the new PS, there's some roles that there is just a duplication. In fact, according to what Nyoro was saying, he was talking about we have a huge size with people doing roles that even the initial office holders were able to do. And when Elisha rose from his seat, he started saying, you know, we're talking about competency, so we're not talking about economy here.
The challenge that we'll have and the challenge that the nominees will have, Honorable Speaker, is to be able to find solutions within whatever area that we are serving, concertedly, that we find a solution around our debt and revenue. Honorable Speaker, I was in the point of saying that out of the revenue that we collect as a country, Honorable Speaker, currently now as we talk, and part of the challenge of, I saw yesterday the debate in the House around CDF and the release of that money, is basically because of the strain. That after collecting 2.4 trillion Kenya shillings, Honorable Speaker, after collecting 2.
Order, Honorable Ndindi. I have a point of order. What is out of order, Honorable?
Speaker, I'm listening to Ndindi Nyoro. Honorable Ndindi Nyoro is like in a lecture hall. We are talking about competence and competencies of individuals who have been nominated to serve in this government. And we are considering their suitability. We are not talking about revenue.
What is out of order,
I think it's still having
Elisha?
hangover of having been a budget chair.
You are out of order. You are obviously out of order. Well, I will allow him to debate. You have a few minutes. Please conclude.
Thank you very much, Honorable Speaker. Some things may not need a response.
You cannot run the country with mere propaganda. And it is very sad that the supposed expert who is supposed to lay facts as they are has now turned and joined the emotional charade. And it's an act of cowardness if when something is raised, then you resort to insults. Come on. I think that's yes. Mbadi should allow the country to have that debate. Now, without it, let's listen to the statement that Ndindi Nyoro made.
I saw headlines in our newspapers the other day in jubilation that we have done a very good thing, because in that year of 20, I think last year or thereabout, we were able to repay our Eurobond. And the people in this hall, because I can see you are able to dig deeper. You talk about in jubilation of having been able to pay the Eurobond of 2014. And it comes out as headline as a jubilation for the country. Now this is the reality. The reality is that you retire a debt of 6.8% with a debt of 10.3%, and then you clap and you want the whole country to be closed for people to celebrate. I'm provoking all of us here. I mean, Kenya is for all of us, and we need to speak these things as clearly as they ought. You cannot go and take a loan from Shylock, you pay a bank, and then you go home, and people should celebrate you for taking a loan with an interest of 20% to pay the one you had that you are paying 12%. Those are the things that will catch up with this country very soon. And by the way, with all honesty, if we do not become more prudent in the several months to come, we are likely to have a very big problem with our debt. Why? If in our revenue collection, over 40% is going into interest rate alone of debt obligations, what are we talking about? The other thing I want us to reflect on around debt, and the reason why this, and I'm challenging even those who are responsible in government to speak about it clearly, because part of this communication is important. You collect revenues of around 2.4 trillion shillings. You use over 1.2 trillion in paying interest rates of debt incurred. So that's 50% that you can do nothing about. Basically what we are doing as a country, the money we are borrowing in terms of PFM Act, you should be borrowing for development alone. But even by doing the math even with a pencil, if we take our revenue collection, you remove CFS, you remove salaries, you're already in red. It means the money we borrow, some of it is for budget support, and clearly that money is for recurrent. You don't need to go very far. Just this data, just do the math around this data, even with a pencil, you'll get the correct figure. So this issue of debt, if we are not progressive enough and prudent enough as a country, in just a few months to come, we will see the ramifications. We do not want Kenya to be a case study like Sri Lanka in the year 2002, in the year 2022, 2023.
And in a very elaborate explanation, is given a very clear explanation. Instead of saying irresponsible, Mbadi should have told the country from what Ndindi Nyoro have said, what is false and what is true. Ndindi Nyoro has said, out of the money we collect, almost half of it we are going into paying interest of a loan. Remember when you've taken a loan, like you've given a loan, and let me explain layman's language. Ukipewa loan ya 100,000, or let me tell you, you're given a loan of 1,000, that money you're given is the principal. The interest is supposed to accrue is what we are paying. We've not even paid the principal. So what this means is we have even delayed the repayment of the principal. And he's saying because, and Mbadi has accepted that most of our loans are actually maturing between now and 2032. So when Nyoro is saying that we are in some sort of a crisis, so what exactly is wrong with that statement? The good expert must allow the country to have this debate. And I know why it's irritating them. And I want to tell you why President Ruto and the team are irritated about Ndindi Nyoro statement. This is not new. This is something that if you were listening to Jimmy Wanjigi in 2024, Jimmy Wanjigi used to go to KTN and Spice and mainstream media and warning the country about the issue of debts. Now today, Mbadi and Elisha Odhiambo are actually attacking Ndindi Nyoro because Nyoro spoke about the debts. What is so wrong? People want to, there is always something that, there is always a shield. When people say, they say, that is national security threat. That is panic. Come on. Kenyans must have this information. And because in due course, the same way now, when Nyoro says we are at default, that is panic. But when the CS says that most of the loans are maturing now, and so we are going to have a problem, that is not panic. But I want to tell you, this is why the president doesn't want the country to speak about debts. Listen, the debt repayment is a conduit of stealing money. Since 2022, the president has appeared in 2 interviews and was asked about the state of our debt. or rather publishing the debt register? None. That document has never been availed. People have always been saying, we've repaid, we've repaid. And what is that debt that we've repaid? So they don't want the people to talk about it, because the conversation will start from, bring the register. And they've always not given the register. I even remember, after Gen Z protest, there was a committee that was formed by the president to evaluate some pending bills, debts. To evaluate our debts. That committee was gazetted and degazetted after 3 months in December. So the president doesn't want people to talk about the debts, because they know that is where the devil lies. Number 2, it has brought focus on the size of government. You promised Kenya that you are not going to run a bloated government. Then after undergoing the Gen Z protest, you decided to expand government so that you can accommodate dissidents under the so-called broad-based government. So when people raise debts, and these debts, a lot of our money goes into recurrent and expenditure, one of the questions we must answer is, are we going to continue with a bloated government? Or must we make it lean, so that at least we reduce money we spend on recurrent expenditure, so that we can free up cash for development? That is a question we've had. And I like the presentation from Nyoro. He's saying countries have gone that path. Ghana went that path. They had panic. So what happened? Zambia went that path. What happened? So instead of, muzzling people and suppressing the voices, the discussion of debt, we should have that debate. And when Ndindi Nyoro was talking about that, nominee, he alluded to duplication of roles. So that is the second reason the president doesn't want the country to speak about it. The third issue is this. The debt questions brings into focus the state of economy. Let me tell you. You see these figures that the president shouts in rallies. I don't know, inflation has increased by double digits. I don't know if increased, I don't know how. Those are cooked figures. That is a figurative language to confuse the village folks. Even nowadays, when they're talking about projects, they're saying the project is 70% done, 13% done, 80% done. No, it is a figurative language to tell people that, you cannot survive on that. And that is why, if you look at the way Mbadi is talking, and I like the presentation, when Mbadi was saying, Jack Wamboka was even telling him that he should not tell people about this and that. He should actually give that money. Hapo anaongea CDF sahi hawajapeana. They deployed Raila to start saying CDF is bad. I'm one person who I agree that bursary needs to be collected to be given at one point. But there are some people that have used CDF in a good way. And there are schools that have been built using CDF. Of which your pesa ukipewa governors. Like my governor. Hakuna kitu wanafanya na hiyo pesa. So some MPs are using the CDF. So because everyone is stealing, let's have the MPs have it. So that wengine wale wenye wanaweza fanya, wenye areas wao watabahatika na machague leaders who can work for them, the CDF will work for them. But the thieves, the termites that will just come out of the woodwork to feast, they might do their thing. So the other issue is this. Ruto government is surviving on debts. Is borrowing locally daily. Borrowing from the local banks daily. So this discussion about debts, Mbadi should not tell us because he's an expert, so no one can talk about it. When they talk about it, he's irresponsible. No way. The country must have that discussion. Remember, those debts are not his personal debts. Those debts are debts taken on behalf of this country. So when the country speaks, then you're saying panic. No way. I find it absurd and irresponsible on the side of the CS to attack Nyoro because Nyoro spoke about debts. Well, those debts are not his personal debts. Those debts are for this country. And it is us who are supposed to speak about them. And when you don't want people to talk about it, then there is something you're hiding. No way.